Hi everyone, Professor Dingman here again, and what we're going to do next is take a look at the graphic organizer slash brainstorm for essay number 1. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you guys so we can get started. All right, so in Canvas, you'll arrive at the Essay 1 Brainstorm and Graphic Organizer page, and it is due on March 10th by 11:59 p.m. So today's an I post tomorrow. Again, you know how I am with the deadlines. If I would like it on time, but if you need, a couple hours or sometime the next day to get that in, that's fine. But remember, we are trying to keep on deadlines for this essay. We have drafts that are going to be due coming up over the weekend. So it's going to be important to try to stay on my drafting schedule so that way you don't fall behind. Okay, so please try to get this in on time by tomorrow night. So what we're doing for this graphic organizer is it's helping you generate and organize your ideas for essay 1. When I was in grad school, I did a little bit of research on pre-writing, and what the research has demonstrated is that whether it's a take-home essay or it's an in-class essay, those students who spend at least 5 minutes planning, brainstorming, outlining their essays generally do much better than students who don't. Okay, so it's a really good strategy that you shouldn't skip, is always trying to plan out, organize, brainstorm your essays instead of just kind of sitting down at a blank screen and trying to plug away at it. I mean, you could do that. Some people it works for, but a lot of people it doesn't, and it just kind of creates writer's blocks. So doing graphic organizers or outlines or any of those types of pre-writing activities are really helpful to get yourself organized and start generating ideas. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start off with brainstorming. Usually you go from brainstorms to outlines to drafts. So that's what we're going to start with. We're going to start with a brainstorm, and I've created a graphic organizer for you. The first one is a sample that we're going to take a look at right now. And then the next one is the actual document. Here's the Google Doc version, and here's the Word doc version, okay? So once you click on that, it'll pull up this annotated sample here. And please note, I don't want you guys commenting or editing on these documents, right? They are my originals that everybody used. If you're ever looking to copy a document, you go here and either make a copy or download as Microsoft Word. And like I said, I have the clean copy for you guys to use here. So you would click that up to this Google Doc. Let's let it populate. And then exactly what I showed you, okay? Don't start asking me for access to this because I'm not going to give it to you. You'll have to download it or copy and paste it into your own document, okay? So again, let's let it finish loading. When you're ready to start working on your own version, click on File, click on either make a copy to add it to your own Google Drive or download, and it'll bring up the options here, and you can download it as a Word doc or whatever else you use here. So that's how we're going to access the document for you to be able to own Brainstorm. Like I said, please don't ask me for access because you're not going to get it. That's my original document. Okay, so let's take a look at my annotated sample. And by annotated, I mean you can see my comments written over here on the side. So we're going to go through and I'll go through and show you how to do this. And I used my own examples here. So what we start off with is just kind of trying to figure out which one of the readings that are going to work for you, all right? So if we take the first thing that I want you to do is choose 3, right? Choose 3 of the readings that you liked, that you felt you connected to. And for me, the 3 that really stuck out for me was Brainology, The Significance of Grit, and last semester I used a different chapter from Drive. I used chapter 6. This semester we used chapter 5. So I just jotted down those 3, and then very quickly I thought of a couple of examples that I could talk about for each of these readings. So if I chose Brainology, right away that pops into my head my 11th grade math class where I had a fixed mindset, my 9th grade Spanish class where I had a growth mindset, and Learning to Drive where I also had a growth mindset. Let me go ahead and zoom in on this a little bit too. Okay, and we're going to change the view. All right, so as you can see, those are my 3 examples that I'm just kind of, just jotting down just to figure out which of these examples I want to use. If I were writing about the significance of grit, my mind thought back to when I was doing karate for quite a few years when I was a kid. participating in the academic pentathlon when I was in middle school, and then also my experience of getting a master's degree as an adult. And you had to be gritty in a master's degree program. And then my last one was, talking about college and work from that chapter from Drive. But like I said, since that's not a chapter you guys, read, we're not going to worry about the example. Ultimately, if I've looked at these three choices, the one that really sticks with you most, the one that I feel like I can really write about and get into, is Brainology. That is one of my favorite articles. And I really just automatically connected to that and could see myself in fixed and growth mindset. So I chose Brainology. So once you kind of make your decision and think about which examples and which articles you like, you're going to narrow it down to the one, okay? And here's where you put the one. So my chosen concepts and text for essay one is Brainology and fixed and growth mindset. So if I were to write this essay, I would be writing about Brainology and explaining how I had fixed and growth mindsets in my different experiences. And that's the next step, is we try to come up with a thesis. All right. Now we'll get into this throughout the semester, but a thesis statement is the backbone of the essay. It's your kind of your main idea, the point you're trying to make with this essay. And in this essay, right, let's go back to the prompt. I'm asking you to explain to me how you had or did not have whichever you picked in three different learning examples, okay? So if we take a look at my sample thesis that I've written here, you can see that I'm introducing the article, right, and the author and the genre. It's called the tag statement, title, author, genre. And I'm also introducing the three experiences that I'm going to be writing about and listing them in the order that I'm going to discuss them in the essay. So let's take a look at my thesis. And my thesis states, Dr. Carol Dweck, in her article Brainology, showed me that I was living with a fixed mindset in math, and that's why I struggled and barely passed. However, in Spanish and when learning to drive, I see that I had a growth mindset, which led me to success in both things. Looking ahead, I am motivated to maintain this growth mindset in English 101 and beyond. Okay, so we can see that this is a clear thesis. Now, first of all, you might be thinking, hey, but that's three sentences there. You're right, it is. And that's because it's a myth to say that a thesis statement has to be like one sentence, all right? In my class, you can write a thesis statement that is up to like three sentences or so. And there's a couple of reasons. One, it gets really awkward if you're trying to cram a lot of ideas into one sentence, all right? And two, it really depends on the complexity of the essay that we're writing, and sometimes particularly in like argumentative essays, which is one we're going to be getting into next, creating an argument and trying to persuade our audience. It might take more than one sentence to get across your argument. So let's let go of that idea that a thesis statement needs to be just one sentence. But I would like you to keep it to 3 and under. Your first entire intro paragraph shouldn't be just nothing but thesis. We do want the thesis to be pretty concise, okay? So it doesn't have a sentence, but it shouldn't be more than 3. Let's try to keep it to 1 to 3 sentences. All right, now let's jump into, again, pointing out what is working in this thesis statement. So again, I've given you, right, the author, the article, right, and the genre. So it's it's an article. The title is Brainology, and the author is Dr. Carol Dweck, and I just weaved that right into my thesis. And then you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to be talking about fixed mindset in my math class first, right? Then second, you can see I bring up Spanish and how that was growth mindset, and learning to drive, and how that was also growth mindset. And then you'll see the last sentence brings up my conclusion point, right? The fact that I'm going to try to maintain that growth mindset in my current English class, if I were taking the class, right? So that's how you come up with your thesis. And keep in mind, this is kind of a working thesis for you too. So, it doesn't have to be perfect in a brainstorm. We're just trying to get the ideas down. So don't feel, the same kind of pressure to make it as clear and elegant as mine is here, all right? But we do want to make sure you're listing out the 3 specific examples from either school or from, work or your learning experiences here. All right, and notice how I followed my own rules. I'm giving 2 academic experiences, my math class and my Spanish class, and then my third example is the non-academic learning experience, right, learning to drive. So like I said, try to stick to that unless you've been out of school for quite a while, then you can write about work or some other learning experience that you've had, okay? So then what we get into next is you'll see a series of boxes, right? And what I'm asking you to do in each of these boxes is help develop those ideas. So in the very first box, you're going to just jot down as many specific examples of details that you can think about from that class, right? So I was trying to, just generate, what do I remember about that class? Well, I remember that it was in 11th grade. Okay, sorry about that, you guys. I had a little glitch here. Let's jump back into the share here. Okay, sorry. So let's get into that specific example. So that specific example is about 11th grade, right? So I'm giving you those things. 11th grade, I remember I had the class after lunch. I remember the teacher was Mr. Johnson, and I remember the specific class was Algebra 2 and Trigonometry. So I'm just trying to jot down those things that I can, create the story with, help explain to the audience what was going on, what that class was about, set the scene, right? I'm trying to set the scene for my audience. Now, how does this experience illustrate my chosen concept? So I'm trying to say that in this class, I had the fixed mindset, right? So I need to jot down some details that illustrate or demonstrate how I had that fixed mindset in this class. And so here are some of the details that I jotted down, right? I sat in the back of the class because I didn't care, right? I didn't do the homework all the way. I'm not sure about math books now, but when I was in high school, you just had to turn to the back of the book and they had all the answers for the odd problems. So I totally cheated on the homework and just did all the odds straight out of the answers from the book and then just kind of sloppily did the rest of the homework. And I didn't get help from my teacher, even though I knew Mr. Johnson. I had him before 11th grade. I had him when I was in middle school. He was one of my basketball coaches. So it wasn't like I didn't know the man. I knew him. I just never went to him for help. And then I didn't study for tests or quizzes because I hated math and I had that fixed mindset and I was like, what's the point of studying? But then you know what happened? I would fail the quizzes and then I would say, oh, see, I don't have it. I'm not good at math. This proves it. But it was because I was never studying. So it was that vicious cycle of why study? I'm not good at it. And then I would, fail the test or the quiz, and then I would confirm that. See, I'm not good at it. So why bother? It was just that vicious cycle. So those are the details I'm trying to just jot down here so that when I sit down and write the paragraph, I have all these details and I can just kind of fill them out. So then the third part of the boxes is how did this concept affect my motivation in this instance? And I just jotted down some quick ideas. Well, because I hated math, because I sat in the back and didn't do all the homework and all that, I felt bored, disconnected, and I kept telling myself I wasn't a math person and that was okay, right? I was like giving myself permission. Well, it's okay. You're not good at math, but you're good at English and these other things. So that's fine. Don't worry about it, right? Like I said, I gave myself permission to mess around. I barely got a C in that class. And as I put here, I think it was a pity C. And I ended up dropping out of math my senior year. Instead of taking a math class, I was like, I've already hit all my requirements. But then because I took that year off math, when I went to go take the placement test to go to Cal State Fullerton, I ended up like bombing the math section and I had to start off in the remedial development level math class. And so, kind of put me a semester behind in terms of trying to get my math requirements out of the way. And if I would have stuck with it, I probably wouldn't have had to take that, those extra classes of math in college. So it ended up kind of coming back and biting me in the butt a little bit. So that's what we're doing with these boxes, right? So the first one, you're just giving as many specific details as you can remember to try to set the scene. And then, like I said, once we start writing the paragraph, you'll fill in those details. We want to know those specific details that show me, right? And that's what, with writing, and particularly with illustrations or with demonstrations. You want to show me in your writing. Don't just tell me you had a fixed mindset. Show me, what does that look like? What are the details that would show me that you had a fixed mindset? And that's why I picked the examples I gave you guys here. Sitting in the back, not doing the homework, cheating on the odd problems, right? And then we also have to explain how that affected us. How did that affect my learning and motivation? Well, it tanked both of those things. I wasn't motivated to learn, so I didn't. And then it ended up, right, causing me to have to take more math than I should have had to take in college and set me back a little bit. All right. So that's what we're doing throughout this graphic organizer. Then you would move on to your next example. And for me, if we go right back up to my thesis, your thesis is your map. Follow your map. We can see you talked about math already. So my next example is going to be Spanish, right? That's example number 2. So then right here is where I'd put, ninth grade Spanish. I started off in Spanish in ninth grade, and I would jot down my details, right? Senora Rosamena, Spanish 1, amazing, vibrant, cool class, right? I just started listing out all the details, kind of like I did for that first example. And for graphic organizers, for brainstorms, keep in mind they don't have to be complete sentences, right? Because you're downloading the information in your brain onto the paper, and you're trying to get it down as quickly as possible. And if you're trying to write complete sentences at this stage, it can actually slow you down, and those details might float out of your brain. So when you're trying to brainstorm, don't worry about spelling, punctuation. Don't worry about trying to write incomplete sentences. Just worry about trying to capture those ideas and getting them down on the paper, okay? And then when we sit down to draft, that's when we'll start adding in those details and fixing them up, all right? So do the same thing for example 2 and then example 3, and we can see going back up to my thesis, if I were to continue, Spanish is my second example, and my third example, my last one, is learning to drive, right? And so that would go in example 3, and I would fill out those details the same way I did for that very first example. All right, now then your last box is going to be down here on the conclusion, right? And don't forget, if you chose, like I said, Brainology, we did that in this class. I think it was a journal. Don't remember if it was a journal or a blog. Double check that one. But I gave you guys that assignment so you could start thinking about how the conclusion is going to work. I was kind of giving you a head fake there. I had you do some of that work thinking about how you could develop a certain trait in this class, because I'm having you do that for this essay. So see my note out here to the side. Note how this specifically addresses my English 101 class. You have to do this in your conclusion too, right? So let's take a look. If I were in this class and I were writing about trying to have a growth mindset, this is what I would say. In this class, I'm going to remember that I need to work harder if I want to get better. Part of working harder is using resources. So I plan on seeing the embedded tutor at least twice this semester, but hopefully more, like for each essay. I will not let setbacks or failures stop me or derail me. If I get negative feedback, I will see it as an opportunity to learn and fix my mistakes. This professor allows revisions, so I will be able to use her feedback to rewrite and earn a better score on my paper. I also realized that I have to try different ways of getting my work done. In the past, I used to procrastinate, but with this 5-unit class, I won't be able to procrastinate and be as successful as I can be. It is therefore important that I stick to my professor's assignment and drafting schedule, and that I actually make a schedule of when in my day I will be working on assignments for this class. Having a growth mindset is important not just in this class, but in everything I'm trying to achieve in my life. I know I will encounter many struggles in my lifetime, but with the right mindset and putting in hard work, I'm confident I will overcome those struggles and make my dreams come true. So you can see I'm doing all the things that I've laid out in that prompt, right? Bringing you up to the present by explaining what I'm going to be doing in this class to develop that growth mindset. And I'm giving those specific examples, right? Seeing the tutor, not getting downtrodden about my my negative feedback, and trying new things to fix it up, right? And then notice that you can project out to the future beyond this class. I understand that, life is always going to throw struggles at me, but if I have the right mindset and I'm willing to put in the effort, I can overcome struggles and barriers and push through to achieve what I want to. All right, so that's what I'm looking for in the conclusion. And again, you can just kind of jot down ideas. I went ahead and wrote like my whole conclusion here, but you can just make a list of things that you plan on doing to help cultivate a growth mindset or grit or responsibility, or to try to overcome barriers, right? So that's what we're doing. And like I said, don't feel like you have to write complete sentences. That one I just kind of went for it, but you guys only have to do like bullet points like we did throughout the whole thing. All right. So this is what we're doing. And like I said, it doesn't have to be complete sentences. And really it depends on you, how you like to use these tools. So I will tell you, the more detail you put into brainstorms and outlines, the easier it is to then sit down and write whole paragraphs, because you've already put so much detail in those brainstorms or outlines, but it's not necessary, right? So it all depends on how you want to how you want to set up your own style of preparing to write an essay. Do you want to front load and get a lot of those things done on the graphic organizers and outlines, or would you kind of want to just do really sparse details here and then fill them in as you sit down and write? Depends on how you write, how you learn, and how well you can recall details. I will always caution you to kind of go heavy on the details in the initial stages, because then it does make it easier for you when you're sitting down to write. But like I said, don't worry about trying to get them in complete sentences. Just put down as many details and points as you can, and worry about turning those details into complete sentences later on when we start drafting. Okay, so for this, we're just coming up with our ideas, choosing the reading and concept, coming up with our working thesis, and then starting to jot down ideas about your 3 learning experiences, and then listing out ideas of how to develop that particular trait in this class, okay? So I hope this covers how you can get started with this brainstorm. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me or text me, and we can go over this, or feel free to take this to the Writing Center. And if you take with our embedded tutors, right? And if you work on this with them, that counts as your first conference. So I would really encourage you to get it in early and get this done. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you soon.